I'm Sarah Hauptman.
I'm Jon Hauptman.
And we are the owners of PHLSter Holsters. We're going to be talking a little bit about how to find your ideal carry position and how to use your body's unique landscape to your advantage. All bodies are different, and each body will have peaks and it'll have valleys. And you can use that landscape to your advantage when you're choosing your carry position and your position for optimum concealment and comfort. Since all bodies are unique, there's no one recipe or formula for where you should carry and where you'll get the best concealment. It's something you need to determine yourself by self-assessing.
Over the years, we have found some general guidelines that are going to help at least get you started and avoid a lot of the early challenges.
So to determine where your peaks and valleys are, the first thing you'll do is look down. So when you look down, no matter how you're built, you're going to see parts of your body that are in your field of view, and you can see where your body curves. So for most people, they'll have a small flat spot in the front of their stomach and another flat spot over here. Whether your stomach is round or flat doesn't really matter because all bodies have areas that are flatter than the surrounding areas. So what you'll do is just look down and find on yourself where your optimal spots are. And ideally, what you'll do is tuck your gun into a flat spot. Could be here, it could be here. What you're looking for is a spot where you can keep the gun off the peaks of your curves and kind of nestle it into a valley. The second step is to look at your body from the side in a mirror. So everybody is different. This will depend on how you're built, but everyone has a point on their body that's the furthest forward. And the clothing is going to drape above and below that point, but you want to avoid putting the gun on that point because that's going to make it stick out. So for me, the furthest point forward on my body is about an inch below my belly button. I'm going to want to avoid putting my gun directly on that peak. I can put it below or I can put it above, and below and above I can make use of that clothing drape. But if I put it directly on the peak, it's going to print. So what you're looking for is those areas of clothing drape. So rather than picking a spot where the clothing is pulled tight, you're going to pick a spot where the clothing drapes. So you can use that to your advantage.
Remember, what we're trying to do is keep the gun in the envelope of space between the clothing and the body. So if you're noticing areas where your clothing consistently contacts your body at rest, stacking a gun in between your body and your clothing at the highest peak where your body and clothing are making the most contact, you're going to have reduced concealment success in that position. So for example, personally, I have a fairly pronounced peak right across the 12 o'clock and sort of right here under my ribs. That's where my clothing is most inclined to contact my body at rest. So placing my gun within those peaks is going to naturally force it to print more. However, I tend to have a pretty significant gap right around here at 2 o'clock between my shirt and my body. There's a little bit more generous space at that location for me personally where my gun can hide. Also, when finding your sweet spot for concealment, you want to avoid areas where your clothing is inclined to stretch or pull tightly across the gun when you're wearing it. One of the reasons that I generally prefer to carry my gun forward of the hips is that most of my normal motions and movements are going to increase the amount that my clothing drapes over the gun, rather than, for example, behind the back, where every time I reach or bend, your clothing will tighten across the gun, decreasing the amount of space between your clothing and your gun during your normal range of motion.
All carry positions have advantages and disadvantages, and it's up to you to choose what's best for you. Carrying in the front of your body provides a lot of concealment advantages, but it's probably the hardest carry position to get right. So you can expect to spend a lot of time experimenting and doing a little trial and error to get it working for you. It's not just a plug and play, one size fits all. It's very individual.
Getting set up for success is going to take a considerable amount of time. And it's also going to vary depending on what you're wearing that day. You might find that one outfit works great and another one you might need to do a little bit more tweaking with. Something that we see a lot of are folks who might be concerned about the degree that they're printing, and they're carrying their gun directly at 12 o'clock and kind of at the equatorial peak of their abdomen, and their belt buckle and their pants are all stacked up on top of the gun. And even without the gun in place, they would find that the features of their clothing by themselves are printing through their shirt. If you're wearing an outfit where your belt and your pants are already printing through the shirt that you've chosen, the chances of being able to conceal a firearm at that location are pretty low too.
Just take your time and experiment a little bit and find the carry position that works best for you for comfort and concealment. A mistake a lot of people make is trying to choose one holster that works for every outfit in their wardrobe, and by doing that, they sacrifice access, they sacrifice draw speed for occasions that are really rare in the scheme of life. So when you're looking for a holster, pick something that works for the 80% of things you wear most. And then you can worry about the special occasion holsters later because you won't use those as much.
When identifying your peaks and valleys, it's also important to consider how much of the valley the gun itself occupies. So if you're thinking about the measurements of the gun and the measurements of yourself, if you've got a decent valley on your body which could conceal a gun, also think about whether or not the size of the gun exceeds or gets close to 100% of your available valley space. That starts to create additional concealment issues. So you want to make sure that not only do you have a decent valley to place the gun, but the gun itself also fits in the valley. So once you know your landscape and know roughly what you're going to install into it, and know that that landscape is going to be fairly consistent across most of your attire, then you can start the process of customizing your holster to fit your body and get really optimized for what you're working with.
And this is a great tip that comes from Kathy Jackson, the author of the Cornered Cat website. There are a lot of differences between men and women, both physically and in the way we dress, but the concealment principles are universal. So getting a solid foundation in the knowledge of how to make a holster conceal on your body will help you conceal no matter what you're wearing and no matter how you're shaped.